So Paul George came back yesterday for the Clippers, and he looked really good, right? He dropped 34, 6 and 2, I think was the stat line on 50% shooting. Really good from three, four steals, a block. It was a vintage Paul George performance against the Jazz in a comeback 25-point down victory. And I just want to talk about like what this Clippers team could look like with Paul George healthy. And now it's looking like they're going to get Norman Powell back sometime next week. They said like 7 to 10 days, so who knows if he'll be back before the play-in. Hopefully, he can get in like a game or two. And then also Kawhi Leonard. There's been talks that he's been feeling better. Who knows what's going to end up working out there? But if he could come back potentially for the play-in game, or if not for a round one series against whoever they end up playing, that could be big. But I mean, first off, just Paul George. With him on this team, I think they're probably good enough to be one of the better teams in the West. I mean, you compare them to like Denver without their two other guys, I think it's about on par, because I think like their role players, Reggie Jackson's pretty good. Zubac, Morris, guys like that, they have a pretty solid roster. You add Paul George to that. Paul George is no Jokic, but he's a really good scorer. I think before the injury this year without Kawhi, he was averaging like 25, 7 and 6. Like, he was having a really good year, and he's a good defender. So I think you add him to this lineup. Now you got Luke Kennard, who wasn't really around when before Paul George got hurt. He's came out. He's been pretty good. Terrence Mann as well. So you add that team in, and I think they're one of like the lighter contenders in the West. If I were to compare them to like Minnesota, I think they could win a playing game against Minnesota. I think they could get the 7 seed, and them against Memphis. I mean, even without Kawhi Leonard, I think that's a series, right? I mean, me personally, I like Memphis. I think they're a good team, and they probably would win that without Norman Powell or Kawhi, but who knows? That would be a series. This is the same team that took the Suns to 6 games last year without Kawhi Leonard, and the team that beat the Jazz last year in the playoffs, and they beat 2 games against him, I think, because he got hurt in Game 4, which is a game they won, but again, they won 2 games against the Jazz without Kawhi Leonard, so I think that's definitely a team that could contend in the playoffs. And then if they get Kawhi back, I mean, I want to say championship. Now, it would be tough for him to come back right away and not have any type of... He would not be 100%. You'd expect to see him at like 80%. But, I mean, he has had a full... he has had the full time to recover. He got hurt like last May. April's upcoming. So, he's had 10, 11 months. So, you would hope that he's made a full recovery and could be like about 90%. That's what we saw from Paul George yesterday. And they've been saying that if one of them is going to come back, both of them are going to come back. So we'll see what happens with Kawhi. But if he comes back, round one series against Memphis with Paul George, Kawhi, round one series against the Suns even. I mean, that's a really intriguing series that I would love to watch. If we saw, the Suns series last year, a lot of people said, myself included, that if Kawhi wasn't hurt, that the Clippers would have gone on to play in the finals. And it'd be interesting to see what would happen if we got to see Kawhi healthy this year. Would they be able to contend? Now the Suns look a lot better than they did last year. I'll give them credit. Their offense looks a lot better. DeAndre Ayton's been playing a lot better. Devin Booker has been on a tear this season, and they look like unstoppable juggernauts this year. But I think the star power of the Clippers, I think like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, like that duo is better than any duo that the Suns would have. I mean, both those guys are, Paul George is close to being on par with Devin Booker. That might be a bit of a hot take, but you look at their numbers, like Devin Booker's at 27, 5, and 5. Paul George is at like 25, 7, and 6. I mean, it's more close than people would think. And then you add in Kawhi Leonard, who, the finals MVP is the defensive player of the years, the numbers, we all know Kawhi Leonard's a superstar. So, you combine those two. I don't know. It would be really interesting to watch them play the Suns. I would probably still take the Suns, especially because we don't know what we'd get from Kawhi. And Paul George, again, like who knows how he would play with Kawhi. He was a lot worse of a player when he was playing as the second option. So who knows what we would see there, but it would make it all the more interesting. So yeah, Paul George back, looks great. And, hopefully the Clippers can contend in the playoffs with him healthy, and Norman Powell and maybe Kawhi.